Hey guys, so I'm here with Brent Charlton. So we're going to talk about customers and kind of like a customer archetype or like customer profiles. And these are like really the kind of the basis for an entire business. Most people kind of have like a pretty general outline of what their customer is. So like they'll know it's a 65-year-old male who tends to reside in the United States or stuff like that. But really kind of like the key that I've figured out over the years is that the deeper you can go, um, obviously, the better you're going to be able to write copy, the better your promotions are going to do. Pretty much everything in your business does better because every single message that you send to your customer is based on what you know about them. And if you don't know as much about them, you're leaving so much money on the table. Um, so I've basically been putting together a profile for a buyer who would be in the survival prepper niche. If you're familiar with this niche, it's pretty much 65 to 75-year-old conservatives, kind of splits about 70-30 male to female. And it's kind of an interesting mix of about 40% of them tend to be kind of higher income, like people who make over 100 grand a year. The other 60%, I would say, is more your blue collar guy from Ohio or Alabama or wherever. Um, we're going to kind of, you want to mainly focus on the male aspect of it today? I think that'd be cool. Just kind of
Yeah,
zero in on that one.
that's what I was thinking. I mean, to be honest, I haven't looked at this a bunch, as you know, but we did
Right.
briefly discuss the idea of doing it. And so it's
Cool.
going to be a little bit on the fly. But in my mind, what I'm thinking of is the male consumer that you're.
Okay. Cool. So, anyways, I should probably introduce Brent. So, Brent has been the coach therapist I've been working with for a while. If you watched any of Ian Stanley's videos, Ian's been doing workshops with him lately. I've been working with Brent as well. And, anyways, this last week I was in LA working with Brent, and I kind of had this profile together for survival buyers. And we were at lunch, and I was like, hey, you know a lot about what makes humans work. Uh, what's your thoughts on this kind of profile I have of these are the buyers? I was like, I have these kind of deep insights. I'm kind of curious to get your feedback. And Brent gave me some really, really good insight stuff I had never even thought of before. And that's kind of what I want to do on this call is show like a breakdown of how deep you really can go. And it really gets to the heart of why people buy stuff. It's almost like this filter or this lens that they see the world through. And it really affects literally every single thing they do. It affects who they end up, affects who they end up being in a relationship with. It affects how they raise their kids. It affects like what job they get. And it obviously affects like what they buy.
Yeah, and I mean, people are in relationship to the products that they're going to buy as well. So, I mean, I think what we're going to focus on is more of like a profile of this customer.
Yep.
But what I want to do is utilize the core issue matrix. So there's 4 core issues and there's 3 ego states that are on that matrix. And so I'm assuming we'll provide them a copy of that so that they can like maybe follow along at some point, like where they can look at it while they're watching this video perhaps or something like that.
Yep. Yep. So I'll provide that in the email. So you should have it already if you're watching this, or I'll probably put it down below. If this is on YouTube, I'll put it down below.
Okay, so
Um,
it does provide a lens, and it's a way to meet the customer where they're at. Like instead of trying to have this idea of what it is that they're going to want, it's like, well, where is this person at, and then what is the product that I have, and how can I market it to them through this lens? Is basically um,
cool.
the idea or the intention of what you'd be doing. There's other application as well, but I think for this as like an intro, this is the best way to kind of look at it
Right.
for a starting point.
Do you want to start with
So
the core issue stuff, or do you want to start with kind of the stuff we talked about when we were at lunch with like the list of stuff I already kind of thought? And
I think it'd be good to hear the list. It's up to you. Like
okay.
we could start with the list of stuff you already thought, or I actually have a couple notes. I told you I only took like 5 minutes on this before you started recording it.
Yeah, but you know this stuff well.
But I took a couple notes on kind of like who this consumer might be through the
Okay.
lens of the matrix. So
Okay.
it doesn't matter to me. It's whatever you want.
Let's start with the notes I had, and that'll give people for people who are not familiar with this market, that'll really give them a better idea of who it is.
Smart.
And then we'll just continue, we'll start a little higher, then we'll go deeper, 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 deeper until we kind of really get to the deep, deep stuff that
Yeah.
most people don't think about.
Sounds good.
Cool. So first thing I wanted to talk about, I'm pulling this up on my computer. So I kind of talked about this already, but your average person kind of thinks of this market as they're white male, 60 to 80 years old. They tend to identify as conservative, maybe libertarian,
That makes sense.
pretty conservative though. Most of them have, in my mind, kids, grandkids. Probably 55% of kids and grandkids. Most of their kids are now grown adults. Um, if you're really not familiar with this market, this is the type of person who listens to Rush Limbaugh, Glenn Beck, watches Fox News. Um, Brent and I both kind of have understand this because of where we grew up. Brent grew up in Texas. I grew up in Ohio, small town Ohio, so I'm very familiar with who this person is. These were my neighbors for first 19 years of my life. And you coming from
And
Texas.
these are all my relatives.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's because the first 10 years of my life was in Texas, and then we moved to New York and LA. So I have a big split, but it's given me a lot of understanding of different groups of people. But yeah, I mean, my original incarnation is rural South Texas in the 80s.
Nice.
So
Nice.
just to give you an idea what that was like.
And that actually brings up another point too, because I talk about this with a lot of friends I have. Like, if you grew up in LA your whole life and you were trying to write copy to this market, it would be very hard for you to understand who the hell they are.
It is. It would be really challenging. I mean, you intuitively wouldn't necessarily understand who they are. You'd have to learn. There is an interconnectedness that people have now, but most people aren't looking outside of their own purview very much. They're really focused kind of on, but it is interesting if you grow up in multiple areas or kind of the major areas of America, you get a really good feel for all different kinds of people. But I think that kind of speaks to why something like this may be beneficial as well. It's like you're not going to really know who that consumer is if you don't have a lot of experience. You are just kind of shooting in the dark.
Yep. All right. So, like we said, we're going to focus on the male buyers. There would obviously be differences with the female buyers, but and maybe we can touch on those at the end. But let's dive into the male one.
Okay.
So these were some of the notes. Basically, me and Brent were at lunch, and I was like, "Here's kind of my profile that I've already put down." So I gave him like the basics, what stuff we just talked about, and then diving into the deeper emotions and the things that really kind of drive these people.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, I was like, fear is the primary driver. Basically, every sales letter, every sales piece you'll see in the survival niche is really built on fear. It's basically um, stuff's going to collapse, natural disaster, government takeover, whatever it is. Everything's kind of built around that, and the fear is really the primary driver. And kind of some notes I had on that is these people tend to live in a world of mistrust. They fear change. They fear anything that looks or talks differently than them. They fear the loss of status they're experiencing in current society, especially your 60, 70-year-old white male who used to be king of the castle, is not very happy with how things are changing and has kind of lost his status nowadays.
Yeah, relevance is, it's not as relevant if it doesn't fit into the culture as much. And that's definitely a part of what's happening with that consumer,
Right.
and the fear makes sense to me. Like building copy that is, or marketing in general that's built around fear, but you still have to meet the customer where they are. And the reality is that a customer like this is not actually fully in touch with the fear components. They're pushed down, and they're really in a place of responding to that fear, and it's typically through anger. So if you're going to meet them where they're at, if you're going to hook them maybe at the beginning and then or cleverly craft in the fear to what you're saying to them, but you got to start with the fact that they're pissed for a variety of reasons,
Right.
in particular based on the fact that they're afraid. And so the
Right.
response, fear and anger are little buddies. So anger's on top, fear's on the bottom. So they're afraid down here, but how they're dealing with that and what their view is, what they're seeing typically is that they're angry. So you would want to focus on the anger, at least to hook. And then from where you go from there is kind of up to you and your skill set, and you know.
That so when we were at lunch, you brought this up to me, and that was very, very eye opening to me, and it made complete sense because yeah, what they really resonate with, and what like you said, what they see and what right in front of them is the anger.
Right, what they're aware of, you know, and it's like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, look at all this shit basically going on. And then it kind of rallies them, you know, like it galvanizes them, gets them moving. So yes, they are afraid, but they're angry, and that's where you would probably want to enter.
Right. And the anger really plays in with the mistrust
Yeah.
because that's like pretty much everything I have written down. They're mistrusting of everything: government, banks, healthcare, big pharma, all of it. It's everyone's out to screw them. Like,
Exactly. And in my model, that's exposure. So that's a child ego state around the issue of safety, and they are exposed. But they're not necessarily in touch with that exposure. They're certainly not going to lead. This consumer is not going to lead with that exposure. Whereas, like, we're talking about a female consumer is going to be more in touch with the fear and the exposure pieces. It's not about solving it all the time, which is also what the male consumer does, is looking for solutions.
yeah,
This is more like his wife. Let's just say if they're married, his wife is afraid. He's rallied around that. Oh, she's afraid. Well, he's afraid too, but he doesn't really have that access typically for the typical American male in that age group. Now, younger men, it's a little different, especially men under 35. But we're not talking about those guys.
right. Awesome. So yeah, that was just that alone is a huge breakthrough in like how if I was writing a sales letter, a sales piece to this market, how I would kind of dive in. Um, super, super insightful.
And it's fun. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of fun if you have a lens, you have a model, you know, and it can kind of reinvigorate you in what you're trying to market as well. I mean, it's kind of fun to put people in this and think, well, how would they be? And then you're going to have to test it, you know.
Right.
But marketing application is not new to what I do. It's just not a huge thing at this point.
Right. Cool. So let's keep going with some of the notes I had, and I'll kind of go a little along with the anger stuff that I had written down, which was basically they feel like they're being screwed over. Other people are getting handouts. They work hard and do it the right way. They're angry at being ignored. It's kind of the silent majority type thing that Trump really capitalized on.
Absolutely.
No one listens to them. Um,
That'll make you angry.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to one of the things we worked on where you talked about people's biggest thing is they want to be seen and witnessed.
Yeah, all people really want, like all a human wants, is to be witnessed and approved of. That's all. That's it. You don't have to approve of what they're doing, like the behavior, but it's like you're still okay. So you don't have to approve in like kind of the surface level way of, oh, I like what you're doing, but it's that I still approve of you. You're okay, even though maybe what you're doing isn't okay, or maybe what you're doing is okay, and you're okay too. But it is about witness and approval. That's all. That's all children want, and that's all adults want. There's just a bunch of stuff built up all around those pieces.
Makes sense.
So in that vein, you want to witness them, and that's what I'm talking
yes.
about. Meeting them where they're at. You want to witness them, because if they get witnessed from you through your copy or through what they see on TV or whatever the marketing strategy is, that alone will make people buy stuff, and they don't even know why. It's just
that's like why they would listen to Rush Limbaugh or Fox News, because it approves of what they believe.
He sees me, and notice that even supersedes sometimes the logic of what is being put out.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this doesn't make any sense fiscally, but it doesn't matter because this guy sees me. Not even getting into like whether someone should be a conservative or a liberal or all that stuff. That's none of my business, and I don't really care. It's just some things make sense, some things don't. Numbers, for example, finite things. People will just forget about all that.
Yep.
You know, it's why people also buy super high dollar items as well that they don't need. Is if you see them and they're like, oh, this reflection of that, it's a lot easier to sell those as well.
Makes sense. So a couple other notes I had. they have a feeling that they have little control over their life and that it's someone else's fault. I tend to think this is more of the blue collar people. Um, I have a feeling the wealthier ones don't think as much like this.
Right, because they've had a little bit more agency in the world. But
Yeah.
understand what you just described is also a level of exposure. The consumer is not going to admit what you just said.
Right.
And so that's why I'm saying about it being like clever in how it's presented. So you'd still want to meet them with what they know and what they think.
Yep.
Speak to the fact that they're actually exposed and maybe feeling a little defective as well. You know, like you're providing the perfect solution for them. If you identify that they're in a defective place, for example, what you want to provide is the fact that, hey, I have a perfect thing for you. This is
Okay.
what it is. But you have to focus on, they're not going to be like, admit, in other words, oh yeah, I'm feeling defective. But that is what's driving them. And so where you decide to intervene, I think really is based on testing, you know, like maybe writing things that are focused on the defective components that really speak to those. But I have a feeling you're not going to get much traction there. It's really going to be with more of the perfect or the closed presentation.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes complete sense.
All right. And you know the model really well, so it makes a lot of sense to you.
Yeah, I was actually just going to explain that. So, if a lot of these words that Brent's talking about, the defective, perfect, all that, exposed, you're obviously not familiar with really. This is all part of Brent's model, and that's in the PDF that I included. Like I said, it should either be down below this video or in the email I send you. I'll put it in one of them. But to have that open and kind of look at it while we're going through this, and we'll certainly dive into that a little more at the end of the call.
Oh yeah, totally.
Right now we're kind of just going over my initial thoughts on who the market is.
Which I appreciate doing it this way because I work best when it's just kind of like there's something there and then I can go with that.
Okay.
In a vacuum. Like I think this is a good way for you to be doing it. We'll see.
Cool. Me too.
Okay. Well, good. I'm glad we feel good about
it. Let's see, a couple other things. So they're pessimistic. We've already kind of touched on that. Deep anger and resentment. We've touched on that. They live in a world of rules. There are certain ways to do things, and when things aren't done that way, they get very angry. Mm-hmm. Very authoritarian in nature.
Yep, I would agree with all of those things. I mean, and those world of rules, that does go into like there's a right way to do things, which is kind of a better than. There's a perfect way to do it, which is they're in a perfect place. So what's starting to form already is that team column is kind of a little bit more active, like as far as better than and being closed, trying to be perfect, and then also being needless. And in this area, you're providing the prepper products can move them back into a needless place. And that's why they're interested in them. Because the reality is this consumer is in a needy place. And it's pretty specific. It's like, I need to get safe, need to maintain relevance, which we talked about how important that is as people age. I need to protect my family, need to prolong life, need to save face to my children. Do not underestimate saving face to your kids. It's a huge driver for the male consumer in that age group.
Yep.
Because the world has changed dramatically and super rapidly since, I hate to sound like I'm ancient because I'm really only 41, but really since the internet and then social media. It's super fast. And anyone my age or even, your age, even though you're a little bit younger, will kind of attest to that. Anyone older than me is like, hell yes. It's like at breakneck speed.
Yep.
So those are all a part of it too. They're consumers are impacted by the social fabric. I mean, they make it up, but they're also impacted by it and driven by it.
Awesome. That was a really good breakdown there. The next thing I had is they crave certainty and control.
Mm-hmm. And that's helpful whenever you're not feeling good in the child column, right? Yep. Like if things are out of control, that's exposed. And then they're closing up in a very particular way around answering that exposure.
Okay. This next part, I kind of basically just listed out very specific things that I know they don't like. Um, this is really easy with this market because all you gotta do is listen to Fox News and you'll hear all this. Um, Specific things they don't like: welfare mooches, elites, illegal immigrants, feminism, hypocrites, liberals, anti-conservative silencing of speech, mainstream media, CNN, Facebook, Google's war against conservative speech, free college health care, people like Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, cultural appropriation gone wild, attacks on men for being men. Uh,
That is actually the biggest one right now, I would say.
yes, I would say.
That is super across all age groups. Remember, I see people in all different ages. Um, that is really pervasive. And I have a lot of reactions to it too, frankly. It's really interesting, the hyperfeminization, and that is against this idea of hypermasculine. It's all like very extreme. But anyway, I don't want to talk about all that. I'll get on the
No,
soapbox.
it's a big. If I'm writing copy to this market, I definitely would. And actually, a lot of the women in this market would be on board with that too because they feel the same way.
Absolutely. That's what's interesting about it is men and women are both having a lot of issues to basically kind of an agenda that's being pushed.
Yeah.
It's out that way. Like, it's that makes me sound crazy conservative, but there seems to be a particular agenda at work, and people don't like it. Americans especially kind of regular folks. You know, that
Yeah.
word "folks" that presidents use. That's kind of what they're implying, because no one says "folks." That's only said in speeches or whenever people are trying to act like they're a lower class than they are.
when Mitt Romney's trying to make it look like he's a normal person.
Right, it's like, dude, just own the fact that you are not normal and you have no idea what's going on the planet. You and I talked even at like the level that we're at financially, like where it's like I feel like I'm losing touch sometimes. So someone like Mitt Romney,
Yeah.
that guy's.
But it's interesting. One of the things I've actually wrote about this in my newsletter and stuff before. You have Trump and you have Romney, who are both very rich guys, and Trump talks like these people talk.
Right, he's witnessing them, as you already mentioned,
Yeah.
and he's actually approving of them at the same time. Like, whatever's up with that guy, the thing is he has some way of kind of like feeling like he approves of them. It comes across, it can't just be entirely false. And it probably goes into some of his roots as far as, frankly, his father's original working class roots. I mean, like, these people grew up in Forest Hills. This is where they settled. And I know New York, right? And like, we lived in Forest Hills when I was in high school. And it is like a leafy, beautiful suburban area. It's not the Upper East Side.
Right.
So he's in a less than to begin with. But anyway, we can talk more about Trump another time if you're.
But I mean, I think it's very instructive because, like, I actually said this to my dad. So my dad's worked in a factory for like 30 years, your regular like blue collar factory worker. And during the election, I didn't think Trump was going to win, but I thought he was going to do really well because when I talked to my dad about it, I was like, oh, I'm just curious, like, how many guys at the factory are like Trump supporters? And he was like, oh, probably 70%. And I was like, that's interesting because that's like normally all Democrats that would vote for that. And I was like, Trump is the kind of guy who could go onto a construction site or into a factory and just talk with guys like that.
Yeah, and the reality is that Hillary Clinton did a terrible job at connecting with who the real people are and what their issues are. In fact, I mean, that's what you're seeing in the whole Democratic Party is they've done a terrible job. They're doing a terrible job at connecting with actual Americans, and Republicans are doing a better job of it. It doesn't matter like whether I agree or disagree with policy.
Right.
The reality is that they're doing a bad job, and that's why she lost that election. It was her fault and her team's fault. I don't care what she says.
And that actually goes back. It's interesting when I write copy. A lot of people like try to put their own. Like I take all my own personal views out of this, and I just try to meet the customer where they're at.
How though? How can you do that? Like, I think that you might get better traction, frankly, if you know what your views are as well, and make sure that you're not triggered about what the consumer is doing. which we've never talked about, but like there's no way for you, for any human, that you can completely just get rid of what your reactions are.
Right.
And so if I were you, I would encourage you to know what those are so they don't sneak up behind you and bite you in the ass when you're trying to write something good for the consumer.
Okay. I've never thought of that, but yeah. Okay.
It's a way to really make sure that you're staying aligned and like kind of writing from an adult place.
Okay.
I bet you weren't expecting that this morning.
No. Turn this into a therapy call.
So thank you for taking that in.
Awesome.
I know we're doing a call that maybe is instructive for others, but I learn something all the time from.
All right, so I'm gonna go on. So one of the things you mentioned, which I also have a big section here, basically they want to be seen as the provider of their family, man of the house, hard worker, earned it on their own. I do things the right way. Very much in that 1950s mindset of man runs the house, man takes care of everything.
And it's either I followed the rules to get here, or I figured it out and I made my own rules. And both of them were actually kind of like a closed stance, like as if there's no other way that could have occurred. But the thing is like, it makes sense, right? Like they're not doing anything wrong by thinking that way. That's just what their experience is.
Right.
This is how I did it for me. And anyone that is entrepreneurial especially can relate to that kind of thinking. And there's truth to it, and then there's some parts that are probably triggery. So yeah, they're definitely going to be closed, and they're definitely going to be like there is a right way. And right. I know what that is. There's a lot of better than that goes on with this consumer. And you don't want to challenge the better than that they're in. In other words, you just want to meet them where they're at and reinforce it. This is for sales. This is for products. Now, in your work as an individual,
different.
The other work I do with individuals as opposed to corporations or consulting for this kind of stuff, you would actually want to provide the equal for yourself. But you don't want to do that for this consumer. You want to help them to stay better then, because then they will buy more stuff.
Right. That's very, very insightful right there.
Good. I'm glad.
A couple other notes I got. They want to return to the good old days they remember before political correctness took over. Couple of these, I got to give a shout out to my buddy Lee Bellinger, who is a very successful entrepreneur in this niche. We were kind of exchanging ideas by email. He gave me a couple of these. This was the one I remember we were at lunch. You said was really dialed in. Basically, they seek vindication in social and political beliefs. They want to show their adult children they've been right all along. Yeah,
super important. I mean, like, because we already talked a little bit about the relevance and kind of losing relevance. And that is a part of aging and maturation, where like you really move into, hey, I'm not where I was, and there's like, I'm not as relevant. And then you move into what's kind of already set up as like a psychosocial stage in psychology, is this thing of generativity. So you move into a different phase of life where it's like, what am I going to provide? Where am I going to leave behind? What's my legacy? And so this could be a part of legacy, or the copy could be written in a way that it's against this idea of legacy, like kind of holding on to relevance. And my guess is that your consumer that is in the 60 to 68-year-old range is more focused on maintaining relevance. And like, I don't see it as 60 to 80. I see it as 60 to 70 and 70 to 80, based on what you're telling me.
Yeah.
70 to 80 is going to be like, how can I continue and make sure that my ideas stick around through my family, my values, my goals, all those things, but it's already happened. So what am I going to leave? Am I going to leave safety for them? And like, are they, why these people want to inherit a world that's destroyed? I don't know. But, that's something that I have a question about. I'm like, put me at ground zero, but I don't know. That's not really who this consumer is.
Right.
So I think that's very much at play in the psychology of this customer.
I'd be really curious to hear you talk a little bit more about the relationship with them and their children and how that kind of affects what they buy.
Well, I mean, I'd have to think a little bit more about like specifics about it, but understand that the world that they came up in is no longer here. And so they've managed to navigate the current world, but their kids know more about things than they do. That is incredibly triggering for most people if they don't spend more time in an adult place. So here are my kids who I think are still just kids. This is like a general consumer. Not every single person's going to be that way, but this group is. These are still just kids. I don't care that this kid is 40 and has children of their own. They're still just a kid, and I know more. Well, but the reality is that you don't. And so that's constantly in your face. Just think about navigating technology alone.
Yeah.
And then whenever they hear all the reports of what's coming, which we'll see. I mean, I've grown up my whole life, this whole sci-fi universe we're supposed to be living in, this like tech-heavy universe. It is kind of starting, but like when they think about that, they're like paralyzed. Like as far as like, retinal scanning and advertising in that way. There's no need for credit cards anymore, for example. Like we already have tons of biometric technology.
They're like just getting used to credit cards.
Getting used to that. And like also like entering credit card information online. Like that's like an old person thing. Like we don't really do that anymore. Like there's just click, 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 and it's done. So anyway.
I actually talk about that a lot in copy, and I do a lot in my copy around safety and security when talking about actually buying stuff online, because to me and you, we don't think twice about ordering something online.
Yeah.
To a 70-year-old from Alabama, it's a big deal to buy something online.
They would rather call you, frankly, but that's not really an option, or if it's an option, it's not pushed, but they'd rather be on the phone.
A lot of them do. Yeah, a lot of the people I consult with, and like my old company, we did a pretty large amount of phone sales.
And that's because they're exposed, right? Like they're in an exposed place around what's going to happen with this information out there. And then for some reason, they think that if there's a person they talk to, that's how they're dealing with their exposure. That makes them feel safer. Oh, I've connected with Janie, and Janie is actually someone who lives in India who's practiced a really good accent. But they don't know that. They don't realize that maybe that's even less safe.
Funny you said that. So we actually used to bring that up in the copy, that other companies, you're getting patched over to a guy named Bob who is in India. I was like, we actually show real pictures and video of our customer service reps here in America.
That is genius.
Yeah, and it'd be like, oh, call, and Maggie will be glad to help you. Maggie's this sweet little 60-year-old woman. She's like,
Maggie might live down the street from you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but that's like a way that like that is that's like, okay, the consumer is exposed and I'm going to provide the safety, and around the issue of safety, wherever you identify, like whether they're, exposed or closed, you want to try to move them to a place of protecting and containing, which is the adult state of that. And so that's what you're doing whenever you recognize, hey, this person's exposed. Let's have a picture of Maggie. They're like woman at the church picnic. It reminds me of like Time Life books, which I don't know if you remember that, but it was like commercials on TV. You feel like operators are standing by. They have like these huge headsets. It's like thing. And they'd be like, thank you for calling Time Life books. Anyway, I just remember that stuff.
Nice. I'm trying to see what else I got. Yeah, a couple other things, but we've pretty much kind of gone over most of the stuff. Kind of the last one is they desire to see themselves as a respected elder who has wisdom and advanced knowledge.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say that's a way that they are needy. And so that's an important thing to notice. Like if you can speak to that and write copy specifically to that need with this demographic, you're going to sell a lot more. Because that's like paramount for most of these men.
Yeah.
There aren't a lot of reflections in the society that these men are okay and that they've done exactly what they're supposed to do. They feel like they can't even open their mouths anymore.
Yes.
So that creates a lot of this anger that we were talking about, and that's why I think really, if nothing else, the focus of this marketing should be anger.
Yep.
And like joining with that. Don't forget, the reason why I plot people out on this matrix and around customers and consumers is like, you want to join with them because then you're witnessing them. You're seeing them for where they are. And if you do that in a way that's non-shaming, which obviously you don't want to shame a consumer in the copy, right? That has to be implied. Like,
right.
For example, you're unhappy and you should be ashamed of that. So if you buy this product, it'll make you happy. That's actually what most advertising is geared towards, is this is going to make you happy.
Right.
And that's implied in this too. You're going to get relief for all the ways that you're triggered essentially emotionally by having this prepper material. And you're going to look good, and you're going to be able to maintain, basically in my model, your teen stance. Do you want me to go through kind of like how I have this person plotted out? Because it is kind of what we've been doing, but
Yep.
and
Yeah, let me kind of give them so the PDF that we attached is kind of Brent's model. It's called his 4 core issues matrix. And this is what he works with people one-on-one with. And we happened to be talking about this when I was in LA, and we had lunch, and he's like, oh yeah, you can do the same thing for customers. And that basically what gave us the idea to kind of shoot this video. So yeah, let's kind of walk through. If you have the PDF, pull up the PDF, and Brent will kind of walk through where he kind of sees this customer on the matrix. And if you could kind of give like a little quick overview of the matrix.
Sure, yeah, if that's helpful, I can give you a little overview. So you have 4 core issues along the left-hand side. So you have worth. What is my worth in this moment? Next is safety. How safe am I? Emotionally safe and physically safe. And then you have the issue of perfection, and that's about being a human and being fallible or not being fallible. And then you have the issue of needs, and that's what I want or need in this moment. Those 4 core issues are at the core of every person, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, while you're sleeping, while you're talking, while you're on the toilet. I don't care what you're doing. Those are up for grabs, and they're at the core of everybody. That's it. All right. I'm not saying there's not other things, but these 4 things is what everything kind of gets distilled back down to whenever you're interacting with yourself or outside of yourself. What you see on the top are the ego states. So you have a child ego state, which corresponds to those 4 core issues. You have a teen ego state, which corresponds to those 4. And then you have this adult state. The adult state is, in my work, what the whole correction method and the different tools I have to get you there. The whole point is that you assess where you are along those 4 core issues and those ego states in the child and teen areas. In other words, how you're triggered by whatever's going on or whatever you're applying this model to. And then we have a way to move you to the adult state. And basically life is better there, and you get more money there, and you have a better experience as well, just living your life and you kind of getting what you want. That's the best place to do that from. You're also seeing things a lot more clearly, frankly. That is more of basically the reality of things is actually what's on that right now, the adult. So since they have it in front of them, I'm not going to go too into detail, but you can kind of see like you have the child, and around the issue of worth, that's a less than. So I'm less than you, everybody's above me, right? If you are in the teen place around worth, then you are better than. So I'm better than you, I know more, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just better than you. And it's like a puffed up state. The child one is like little and small.
So you would say for like the survival market, they're probably in the teen.
Perfect. I think we should do it at the same time. So basically in the survival market with this male consumer, all right, because the female is not necessarily going to be there as much. She might be, but it's a little bit, it's more chance that it should be more of in touch with the less than, but the male consumer is going to be in touch with the better than. And so some things we've already talked about fit right into that. I'll go through some of them. That this is my little prep before we talked, but now we have more material basically. So they know better than everybody else. I've gotten where I am by knowing more than you. You're an idiot. I'm smart. That's a lot of this consumer. And I'm the only one who's doing anything about this. Don't underestimate that. This better than is like, I'm doing something about this, and I'm the only one that can do anything about this. Right? And they're not even so that's some of the things I identified about better than. And then we've talked about some things as well that are better than.
Yep.
Do you have anything to add, like kind of to highlight from your stuff that we've already talked about that fits into a better than? You don't have to. I'm just saying there may be something that you could highlight, because I don't remember every detail of what.
I mean, a lot of what they would relate with, like they feel better than, let's say liberals, for example, like 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess both ends of the spectrum are in the better than when it comes to that.
Absolutely. And so that's a great thing that, depending on the venue for the marketing that you're writing, like where you're going to place the ad or the clickbait, like whatever it is, what you just said could drive some of that.
Yeah.
You know, so this can be like very far reaching as far as like, if you have this lens, it can be like, all right, how do I market? And then where do I put the ads? Where online should this go? And frankly, as well as developing the products themselves. Like if you have a consumer in mind, but you don't have a product. So clients I have that develop products, they don't have something to sell. They develop something to sell. This can be used to go, okay, what would they need based on how they're triggered within this matrix?
That's really interesting. Let's save that to the end, maybe chat about it a little bit.
If we have time, we will, because here's the deal. I'm going to go through this, and then you know how things are, and I'm not trying to be this guy, but it's just the way it is.
Yep.
I have like 8 people that I see back to back after this, and I have to start at 10.
Okay.
So, but let me go through the rest of it, all right?
Cool.
Because we're doing good. I think we still have plenty of time.
All right.
So if you look down there at safety, you have exposed and closed. This consumer is going to be much more in touch with the closed state of things. And this is where a lot of the anger is also, and resentment comes from. So basically this consumer is closed to alternatives. The world is going to end, and it is going to be fucked up, but my clan is going to survive, basically. That's kind of what it's about. I guess it's a charged word. But it's like, I didn't mean it in that way. That's funny. But literally, my people are going to survive. I'm going to get out of this.
Yep.
And then, so this possibility that a doomsday scenario will or will not happen. One of the main ways they're closed. And then I have got to get safe. So what I mean by that is that actually they have a bunch going on in the exposed area, or they wouldn't be closed. Because understand, the child stuff is present, or the teen stuff wouldn't show up. So that consumer wouldn't be, that customer wouldn't be in a closed place if they didn't have some exposure. But what I was telling you is that you want to connect with them on where they are, which is they're in this closed and better than so far, right? But what's in the exposed thing is where all this fear you're talking about. And we talked about a lot of different things as to how that fear is coming out, but that is literally the exposure. So if they're exposed around letting people down in their family, right? Exposed about not providing and not being able to provide anymore.
Lots of guilt and shame around that.
Absolutely. Very nice. And they're not going to be able to provide in this environment. So understand that this kind of male, their whole purpose and how they've been socialized is to provide. If there's no resources, how am I going to provide? So understand that that's really triggering for them, and they don't even realize it. Yep. And so what's happening though is you're providing, this prepping company or whatever, these products are providing a way to provide. And so they're very exposed around that, and that's something that if you speak to, I have a feeling it'll test really high.
Yep.
And then also they've been screwed over, which we already mentioned. The whole world has screwed me. I did everything right. I'm better than everybody. We already talked about. I'm closed. I've done everything right. And I'm still getting screwed. And so that is really, really fear-inducing for people and makes Americans in particular very, very angry.
Yep.
You know. Okay. So then if I keep going, we go down.
Yeah, this is great. Keep going. This is awesome.
So let's go down to perfect. So if I'm defect, so the consumer, I keep saying the consumer because I'm used to it the other way around. The customer is going to be more in a perfect place. Okay, this customer is going to be in a perfect place. So perfectly prepared. I have to get perfectly prepared. Is this going to perfectly prepare me? I hope so. And so that's kind of what they're looking for. I can do this exactly right. I can do everything exactly right, and I can do this exactly right. So if you can make them feel confident about the actual purchasing process as well,
yep,
you'll do better.
They don't want to make a mistake.
Correct. And so you need to make it really, really easy, but it has to be seamless and perfect. Now that's like a user experience kind of consultation. That's a little different, but you can kind of see how these fit together. And then appearing perfect to others. Look what I did. I'm the perfect little prepper. I'm the perfect little provider. And I look great. They're not going to admit that they're appearance driven or that they care about status and those things, but they do. And that's why I'm saying if you advertise to the status or to those things, you're not going to hit this group. That's not who these people are. They're not in touch with that, Whereas like where I live in West Los Angeles, everybody's freaking in touch with that. That's what everyone's doing. A lot of people are doing. It's very status-driven culture.
Yep.
So different kind of prepper. There are some nuances here.
So you're saying it's more just one up on the people around them than
it's one up on people around them,
yep.
opposed to like I'm trying to achieve status.
Okay.
Like no one's like trying to achieve. I don't think people are like here. This happens here. People are like, oh, I bought all this land and I have a bunker. So you have like this kind of wealthier person.
Yep.
They're going to be someone that is making, I would say probably 250 to 500 and up. That's a prepper because they exist. I have clients that do this.
Yep.
And they own land and build bunkers, and they like show their friends how great their bunker is. It's a little nutty. I'm not saying they stay this way, but this is like coming in the door. I see this sometimes. And then the world of rules. There's no way that they're perfect. Okay.
Yep.
And then, but what's happening too is there's this defective that's driving this perfection. So I can't do it. How am I gonna, if I don't have any resources, how am I gonna provide? This is a way that also I'm feeling defective. I can't do it on my own. So these are things that are like occluded from them. Like, I can't do this on my own. I don't like how that feels. But that's like what this product is going to provide me, right? Yep. And then we already talked about remaining relevant and how important that is to the people around them and to the culture as a whole. Then there's this idea too of like, I'm going to protect everybody and myself and then repopulate the land. I mean, there's something about going on there too. And so I'm not really going to get into all that, but like there's something about that. Like I'm going to create a whole new world as well. There's like hope components this consumer has that's somewhat occluded from them too. It's not just I'm going to survive and I hope to survive. It's that I'm going to survive and then we're going to return. It's like all of those kind of post-apocalyptic movies where at the end there's like a sunrise over the horizon and stuff.
Right.
Oh, we get to go back and start over. Yay!
That could be about like taking it back to like when things were great before.
Exactly. That's the connection I'm trying to make. And so you want to speak to that, but through a hope component, not through a like, oh, we have to return. It's like you will be able to return.
Yeah.
And then you're going to be king again. Then if you go down to needy, so this consumer is not in a needless place. Okay, so this is something that's a little different. They're not in a teen place here. They're actually in a child place. If they were being needless, they wouldn't be looking for your products, for the prepping products. They're in a needy place and they're in touch with it and they don't like it. And what it is I need to get safe. I need to maintain this relevance. I need to be able to provide. I need to protect. I need to prolong life. I need to be Big Daddy. I need to be, these are the things that are going on with this person. And they're in touch with some of that. And so what you'd be providing is a return to needlessness, which is the teen around needs.
Yep.
And you're doing that through offering some adult stuff, which is awareness of how they can become needless again. So in individual work, as you know, if you identify needy or needless, you're trying to move yourself to a place of being aware because then your life is better. You're not going to move that customer to a place of
right.
awareness. You want to keep them in the place of, hey, let me provide you this needlessness.
Yep.
So I'm not trying to manipulate people, but this is marketing and advertising. And understand that, this lens originally is designed to help people. This is back in the day, originally designed to help people to move themselves. And that's the kind of work that you're doing, the kind of person you're doing. But when we apply it to, certain demographics and anything like consumerism and selling products, you're going to want to keep them in some of those places because then they're going to buy what you want to sell.
Right. Right.
It's 10:01.
Okay.
So I kind of went a little, but I hope that is.
Yeah, that was, I learned a shitload just watching that, just listening to you. Yeah.
I'm so glad.
Yeah. I'm sure everybody who watches is going to get a ton of ton of insight from it. So
Cool.
yeah, if you like it, shoot me an email. Let me know what you think of it. I'll share the feedback with Brent.
Yeah, I would love to hear like what, if anyone has feedback about it, or, and if they're interested in anything around it, email you. They can also email me at my website
Yep.
if they want to. But thank you very much. This was super fun.
Awesome. Yeah.
I love it.
Oh, that was really good.
All right, cool. Well, thank you
Cool,
very
man.
much.
Thank you.
I'll see you on Thursday.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
All
All
right.
right. Sounds good.
Later.
Bye-bye.